Redeemer Queens Park exists to help connect Jesus to people, people to community, and community to mission. And Redeemer is centered in Queens Park, and that's where we have our meetings, but we're actually a community spread out all across London. Thanks for joining us today. We're in Boxing Day 2020, but let's take a moment and think back over the last year. Let's put ourselves in Boxing Day 2019, 365 days ago. Our biggest worry last year was what Brexit would do to the things around us in 2020 as we carried on. Many of us were enjoying a room full of friends and family and food and drink, and our relational meters were filled all the way up 365 days ago. We were forming resolutions that were going to drive us into the year ahead. And we had fresh hopes and anticipations of the great things that the year ahead had for us. That was 365 days ago. That was where you and I were. And yet we can look back and we know most of the things we were sitting and thinking Boxing Day 2019 probably did not come to reality. It's likely that those anticipations were even dashed, and we're sitting here today 365 days later, disappointed and down. Let's look, as we move ahead, Boxing Day today, looking into 21, what's going through our minds? We're praise God, there's a vaccine for coronavirus that's beginning to be administered, but it's actually unlikely that things are going to return to normal anytime soon as we look at the year ahead. Boxing Day 2020, there's a potential no-deal Brexit looming in front of us, and some industries that just got slammed by the lockdowns of 2020, they look to have no quick recovery by the no-deal Brexit ahead of us. Some of us feel the loneliness of being relationally separated during lockdown of 2020, even over Christmas, not being able to spend good time with our friends and family. And we're entering 2021 with a relational deficit. Redeemer community, for us, we were so excited about the hopes and dreams of launching weekly public gatherings as a church community in the spring of 2020, and yet that was unable to happen. And as we look ahead into 2021, we hope to be able to launch weekly public gatherings in January, and yet we know after the year behind us, there's no guarantee. So the question is, how do we move forward into 2021? With what attitudes and with what convictions can we face the uncertainties of the year ahead of us? We're going to spend the next 2 weeks looking into the book of Hebrews. Hebrews 10:38 gives us the answers. What conviction and what attitude should we look at the year ahead with? Hebrews 10:38 says, "The righteous one will live by faith." And Hebrews 10:34 tells us a description of what the faithful person looks like. Hebrews 10:34 says, "You suffered," the faithful person, "you suffered along with those in prison. You joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourselves had a better and lasting possessions." So the faith-filled person is able to move ahead into the unknown and uncertainties of the years ahead because we're certain that there's a better and lasting possessions that are ours. Redeemer, we can hold loosely to the economic instability, knowing that something more stable is ours by faith. We can give up our preferences, we can give up our comforts, knowing that there's a high prize that's there to comfort us, and it's ours by faith. Friends, we can excitedly and confidently move into 2021 because faith is ultimately, it's not looking at the circumstances around us for stability. It's looking to something greater. As we spend the next 2 weeks examining Hebrews 11, looking at the nature of faith today, and the next week, Thomas, looking at the life of faith, we're going to see a type of person that faith creates, the type of person created by biblical faith. And it's incredibly steady. And Hebrews 11 shows us that by faith, people are unleashed to have certainty and stability as they move ahead. Redeemer family, we're going to see that Hebrews 11 gives us a way of moving forward into the uncertainty of 2021, hoping to launch weekly public gatherings, and we do it by faith. And for others joining us, Hebrews 11 tells us how we can move forward into the year ahead, 2021, with confidence, certainty, and resiliency. Let's move into Hebrews 11, verses 1 through 3. We're going to examine the nature of faith. Hebrews 11, verse 1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and the assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So first, we're going to see from the text, there's a distortion of faith. After that, the second big idea is that faith has a definition. We're going to look at the definition of faith. And finally, we're going to look at the description of faith. First, the distortion of faith. For strong Christians and the staunchest atheists alike, we can get faith distorted in our heads and in our hearts. So let's look and see some typical ways in culture and even amongst us that faith gets distorted. First, Friedrich Nietzsche, he said this about faith. Faith means not wanting to know what is true. This quote depicts what we would say faith as the head in the sand, distortion, ignorance even. This distortion understands faith and people of faith to ignorantly and staunchly hold on to beliefs in spite of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Biblical faith, however, enlightens each of us to what is most true in reality. Faith as head in the sand, distortion. The next one, George Michael in his famous 1987 song, Faith, you gotta have faith. He illustrates and depicts faith as a feeling distortion. This distortion understands that faith actually lacks substance. Faith is something that you just put on, and it's the way in which we get through the hard things of life, just by putting on a faithful and a jolly disposition. In correction to this distortion, we're going to see that Hebrews 11 shows us that there's rock solid substance to biblical faith. H.L. Mencken, in this third distortion of faith, he says faith may be defined briefly as an illogical belief in the occurrence of improbability. This depicts faith as optimistic, wishful thinking, this distortion. This distortion understands faith to be akin to optimism or just a good outlook on life. Our positivity actually allows us to face the circumstances that can otherwise drag us down. In contrast, biblical faith is not merely wishful thinking. London's own pastor, John Stott, said faith is not a synonym for credulity. It's not a synonym for superstition. It's neither irrational nor is biblical faith illogical. Faith is certitude in one higher than the circumstances of everyday life, the substance of faith. Faith is not just ignorance with head in the sand. Faith isn't just a feeling we take on. Ultimately, faith isn't optimism or wishful thinking. We're going to see as we move into the definition of faith next that faith gives us certainty and resiliency to face the uncertainties of years ahead. Guys, we just looked at some common distortions of what biblical faith is. Next, let's look at the definition of faith from Hebrews chapter 11. Verse 1 tells us, now faith is confidence in what we hope for, and it's the assurance about what we do not see. And what this definition of faith does is it combats the two greatest fears that we have in the human existence. Greatest fear number one, a fear of the future. Anxieties keep us up at night about what's possible in the future and the unseen. The unseen, the things that we can't see that can sneak up on us, is another great fear of the human existence. Through faith, we can have both future certitude and visual certitude. First, faith is confidence in what we hope for. That gives us future certitude. As we remember Boxing Day 2019 and our plans and hopes for the year ahead, we're all reminded that hope simply cannot be put in the circumstances around us or what we hope might happen. We worry about our economic future as we head into 2021. Brexit, the lingering effects of COVID. We worry about economic stability. We worry about our children and our parents and how they're doing and their health. And we worry about our own health uniquely in this time. And the life circumstances of 2020 tell us we're going to get let down in these areas and lots more. But biblical faith will never, ever let us down. Confidence, as the text tells us, comes from the root of foundation. Additionally, the word confidence, the root of confidence, it relates to a title deed, the rock-solid substance of how transactions take place. The idea here is that faith grabs hold of what is hoped for. Faith clings to what is hoped for, and what is hoped for is the promises of an eternal, transcendent, yet perfectly involved God. Biblical faith has God as the object of our faith, and that's why biblical faith provides certitude. While our faith can waver, the object of our faith can never, ever waver. God promises never to leave us or forsake us. God promises to complete the good work that He's begun in us. God promises that in every situation, He's working for the good of you and me who love Him. And God promises that one day we're going to be united with Him in the end. We trust in that God and we trust in the promises of that God. And that's why biblical faith provides certitude, future certitude. Faith gives us the rock-solid certainty for the future, even in the midst of the most uncertain circumstances around us. Because our faith isn't in the circumstances, our faith is in an unchanging God. Faith meets us in our anxieties and gives us hope for the future. Additionally, faith gives us visual certainty about the unseen things ahead of us. Faith is the assurance about what we do not see. This gives us visual certainty, as the second half of verse 1 tells us. Our fears of the unseen have been revealed as we've journeyed through 2020 together. There's a virus that is unseen to the human eye that has shut the world down. We walk onto the tube and we wonder, is the virus lurking on the handhold that I just put my hand on, or is the virus lurking in the person that I just sat beside? The fears of the coronavirus would be so much lessened if somehow we could see it. It's the fear of the unseen. Or what kept us afraid as children when we went to bed at night? The darkness meant that the things that we were afraid of were unseen. And that's what scared us. But biblical faith assures us of the reality of the unseen. Biblical faith are the spectacles by which the unseen things become seen. The certainty of the existence of a transcendent God. It gives us certainty of the reality that there is a spiritual enemy out there. Faith gives us certainty of a spiritual bond amongst the church family, these unseen things that become seen because of faith. Until the last 300 years in human history, it was virtually unquestioned that there were spiritual realities, unseen, but very real, going on around us. But the Enlightenment changed all that. And even today, present day, we think we're so far advanced, and yet the majority world believes and the unseen spiritual realities going on around us. So gently I say this, if you don't believe in the spiritual realm, the unseen things going on around us, then you are in the minority. Faith gives us assurance of an unseen creator who spoke everything that we see into creation. Let's see what verse 3 says from the text. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So some would attribute the existence of all that we see around us and even human existence to an accidental collision in the stratosphere somewhere, or some primordial goop that under the right conditions produced human life eventually. But biblical faith in God, revealed in the Bible, is the conduit to understanding that everything we see has its origin in God, the Creator. Think of this story of mice who lived in a piano, and they heard the beautiful melody day after day. They enjoyed the warm surroundings of the wooden box that they found themselves in, and for a while they just thought the wooden box created the beautiful melody. Well, then one mouse ventured up, and he actually saw it's these strings of different lengths and of different tensions, and those strings are the origin of the beautiful melody. And then later on, another mouse ventured even further, and she saw, no, it's not the strings themselves, but it's these hammers that hit down on the strings that are the cause of the beautiful melody. And as we zoom out, we all know it's the pianist above it all and outside of the piano that's causing the beautiful melody that those mice heard. Science and faith are not at odds here, friends. Science increases the majesty of God for the man and woman who look around by faith. Faith in God steadies the two things that bring instability to our life: worry about the future and fear of the unseen. Faith in God brings future certitude as we put our hope and trust in the promises of God. And it brings visual certitude as we see the unseen spiritual order. Friends, we've looked at some distortions of biblical faith. We've looked at the definition from the text of biblical faith. And here we're going to finish as we look at the depiction of faith. And all this may be ethereal for you. It's in the sky and intangible. And maybe you're thinking, why can't God just make faith plain and untouchable? And the good news that we just got finished looking at in Christmas is that God came in human form. He made it tangible. God was seen, God was touched, and God spoke. Hebrews 1:1-2 says, in the past God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through him he made the universe. Jesus came to make the unseen creator seen. Jesus came as the ultimate object of faith, friends. His perfect life, his substitutionary death in our place, his rise from the dead to defeat death and sin. This changed everything, friends. And it's not ethereal faith that we're talking about. It's faith in this historical man, and it's faith in the things that he came to do in real time, in real space, and in real history that changes everything. This Jesus had a lot to say about faith, but he didn't insist that humanity have big faith. What he actually said, it's faith the size of a mustard seed that can do incredible things, because it's not about the size of the faith, it's about the strength of the object in which that faith is placed. Here's what John Calvin said. When we stress that faith ought to be certain and secure, We do not have in mind a certainty without doubt or a security without anxiety. Rather, we affirm that believers have a perpetual struggle with their own lack of faith and are far from possessing a peaceful conscience, never interrupted by any disturbance. On the other hand, we want to deny that they may fall out of or depart from their confidence in the divine mercy, no matter how much they have been troubled. So here's the big idea as we land. It's okay for you to feel weak. In fact, Jesus expected and anticipated that you feel weak. The big idea is that we can move forward into 2021 because faith is trusting that Jesus is going to be faithful to me and to you, even when our faith is lacking, even when we are not faithful to Him. Redeemer, Jesus, is holding on to us. Redeemer, Jesus is protecting us in the unseen spiritual battle, and Jesus is coming back again, making our unseen faith sight. Faith in this object, Jesus, frees us to take bold risks. It frees us to be resilient people in the face of the craziness that 2021 surely has to offer. Hebrews 10:34 says, because you knew that you yourselves had a better and lasting possession. For you and me, that possession, that prize is Jesus. Ultimately, the better and lasting possession. We find it in the person and we find it in the work that Jesus accomplished. He is ours and we are His, friends. So we can enter into the uncertainties of the year ahead and the tasks that we've been tasked to do. We can enter it all by faith.